Good afternoon, everyone. This is Wade Fox. I'm your host for this session of Second Opinion. This is a great session, we believe, because it is right ahead of our March 28th town meeting. It'll be at 10 o'clock in the Abbot School, I believe. It's a traditional meeting that we have here to try to bring the issues ahead of time so that you can have somewhat of an informed opinion going into this. And I'd like to introduce my guests, if I could. On the far right, I've got Dennis Galvin, who is the co-chair, I guess, of the Planning Committee. We have David Keele, who's a member of the School Committee. And then we have Scott Hazelton, who is chairman, I believe, of the Board of Selectmen. So we've got three of the more powerful boards represented here. And we're going to try to get right to the subjects and allow them to talk about what they think is the most important part of the upcoming town meeting, the warrant articles. And then we'll ask some little sub-questions on it. Some of this is going to be some new information, so I hope you'll stay with us through the whole thing. Let's start off with the Planning Board. Dennis, if you would be so kind as to tell us what you think the top couple issues that are going to be at the town meeting this year for Planning Board.
Sure, thank you, Wade. I appreciate that. I see about 4, maybe 5 issues that touch on the Planning Board. I think the first one, for those who are interested in the Master Plan Implementation Committee, there will be a report given on the status of that committee and the opening article, which is relates to town reports. There are a couple of issues related to street acceptances, and for those who are still don't understand what that is all about, it represents the idea that roads and subdivisions, streets in those subdivisions are now being accepted to be taken over for maintenance by the town and plowed and repaired and things like that. There's a very interesting petitioner article that's on tap with regard to affordable housing and with regard to the operation of committees. And I'm still in the process of trying to understand that issue, but obviously affordable housing has been an issue with the Planning Board. We've tried to move it forward. We're going to see what the intent, what the purpose of this petition is, and I think that should be a very interesting discussion. The last thing is the issue about the openness of the committees. I mean, we run a master plan committee. We run in comprehensive master plan as well as spot committees. Like, for example, we did the one on regulation on the marijuana facility. It's going to be interesting to see what the impact may be on these committees. I know there's a lot of interest in regards to heightening the detail and minutes and things like that, and it may not seem like much, but if you're trying to recruit people to come on committees, sometimes that can be a little intimidating. So these are things that are all going to work their way out as a result of this meeting. It'd be interesting to see how it goes. Okay, thank you, Dennis. David, what does the school committee have planned for this session?
The school, well, first off, Wade, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. But the school committee, I think in my 7 years on the board, it's been a little bit of a unique year. We seem to be coming out of this economic haze that we've been. Early on in the process this year, there was great coordination with the Board of Selectmen through the town manager and the superintendent of the school committee to come to a consensus as to where we are with respect to the budget. Our budget increase, last year we were at about $51.3 million. This year there's a consensus that we're bringing that to about $53.6 million. Just to highlight a couple features for the voters of Westford, just to roll forward or to maintain what we have, that would be about a 3.5% increase. This year, however, we're looking for just maybe less than 1% of some enhancements. The enhancements, fortunately, are always generally related to special education. Westford has a fantastic special education program, does a superb job for many of our students. Our special education population's probably about maybe 16-17% of the school population. So we're very, very excited that we were able to build the consensus early this year. The other issues that I anticipate could come up is where we are with the Robinson and the day schools, although those are issues that have already been decided. Usually they give updates. We're very excited to know that we're going to be improving some very old buildings in our fleet. I anticipate there'll be some conversations on the utilization of the buildings in our fleet. We have 10 buildings. We have the Millennium School, which is actually a temporary facility, as to where we're going to be going with that. But by and large, it's been a somewhat of a quiet year, and we're looking forward to the continued support of the town for the school budget.
Oh, good, good. Scott, obviously the Board of Selectmen carry a lot of the burden of this, and I don't want you to have to talk for 20 minutes straight, so can you give me the top couple that you think are most important?
Certainly the budget is most important in the sense of that's what keeps the town a going concern, and the budget, operating budget, also a capital budget. But in terms of the other things in the warrant, I would argue that the fire station is the most important. We're looking at building a new center fire station. We've been looking at this for several months, in fact, well over a year in the case of the initial discussions about where it should be sited. There'll be a lot of discussion, I'm sure, about the location, the spending, and the services that we're providing in the station. So I would encourage actually those listening, if you're interested, next Saturday, March 14th, there's an open house at the current fire headquarters. I think it's like 10 to 2. Drop by, you can get a tour of the current station, see what the shortcomings are, meet the firefighters and see some of the gear, and get an education on what we need for a new fire headquarters. And I think second and related, but separate, is a combined police and fire dispatch, which would improve the efficiency of our operations on the emergency services side. Also been looking at that for some time, done some tours of other facilities where they combine these activities and I think serve the public even better than we do currently.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I want to kind of look at this. I appreciate the overview. Now I'd like to get a little granular, if I could, down to some of these things. And since you started off with that, I was looking at, there's an Article 3 about some operating expenses and so forth, and I noticed there's $550,000 in there for ice and snow removal. Prior to this discussion, I heard that other towns have gotten reimbursed from the state. Is there any chance that Westford would be reimbursed?
Yes, I mean, they've not been reimbursed yet, to my knowledge. What happens is a process, usually by county. They take a look at the expenses incurred over and above a normal winter, so rather large storms. We've had, I believe, 4 of them that qualify now. Certainly the major blizzard with 3 feet of snow, but we've had several subsequent 1 foot plus storms. Those we've applied for money, and we would expect to get some fraction of that back. In fact, probably a good sized fraction of that back. But that's to be determined. To be determined,
okay.
And to put it in perspective, I think the first storm alone cost us around $200,000 for ice removal. We've applied for, I think, $179,000 for reimbursement. So that's the kind of scale we're talking about. It would be significant money.
Okay. Just as a side issue, a question: when we have these storms and so forth in the school system, and we've got people shoveling snow off of roofs, who does that? Is that the town? Is that the school system?
It was interesting, and I'm going to have some fun with Scott. I'm going to correct something. We've had several 2-foot storms, as opposed to what he's being modest and what this highway department has gone through this year. But actually, with the first major storm we had, school obviously was called off Monday. But the reason why school was called off on Tuesday was because Chip Barrett, who does an outstanding job for the town, contacted the superintendent and just advised him that he couldn't get the parking lots cleared. That the priority at the time was getting the roads cleared just to get people to and from work and for the emergency vehicles. And the primary reason why we had school called off the second day was because Chip and his team were unable to get the parking lots clean for the teachers and the students.
Okay.
I'd just like to add to that. I think that I think all of us would agree that Chip Barrett and his staff are the unsung heroes of this entire winter of 2015. They've worked very hard, and the townsfolk have reaped a lot of benefit from their effort. I just wanted to make sure that they get mentioned for what they've done.
And also, just to add to that, we've had to do things this year which we haven't in the past. For those who are familiar, well, for those who are unfamiliar with some of our buildings, we have the Millennium School where the administration is. Well, that's a flat building, and at one point, just with one storm, a combination of 2 storms, we had well over 4 feet of snow on a flat temporary building structure, and we had to get the highway department out to that building on ladders up on top. I think they did it with shovels. I don't know how they get a snowblower up there, but they were able to get the building cleared and to make sure it was safe, because we have a preschool in that building.
Yeah.
And there were real concerns, and the highway department really shined during these moments, and I just want to commend them for all their work this year.
Well, good. I kind of lead up to my question. Really, I was going to get to is one of the articles. I know it's a rough winter, but I did notice that there's an awful lot of appropriations for trucks in one of the articles. Is that to replace the fleet, or are the hard winters really wearing us out?
No, actually, we proposed that before the winter came along. I mean, the biggest truck is it's a 10-wheel dump truck. The current truck is a 2000, so it's a 13, 14-year-old, 15-year-old truck, becoming a maintenance expense, and therefore it's more cost-effective to replace it. We have an excavator that I think is 1979 excavator that we're going to replace. Both it and a tractor gets replaced with one machine that can do the work of both of them. And then there's some smaller trucks. There's a 3/4-ton pickup, a couple of 1-ton trucks, and those are much like a police car. They're on the road constantly, and you have to, from a capital standpoint, budget to replace those things on an ongoing basis, or some year end up buying way too much and hurting the budget. So it's a planned replacement cycle. I would note the capital committee is composed of the town manager, budget director, one of the selectmen, finance committee chairman, public works initiative individuals, several members, and they spend a lot of time looking at all the town capital needs, prioritizing them. And so what is actually in this budget this year is what we can afford for the year, but there's a whole sequence of understood needs coming forward that they take a lot of time to investigate and prioritize for the town.
Okay. There's an article in here real quickly about main blasting and some remediation on the...
Well, it's not main blasting. There was certainly because of work done previously, there was perchlorate issues with the town water supply, and there was a settlement with main blasting to give the town some money to take care of that. That settlement we've gone through, so the $200,000 on the warrant is for it's out of our free cash. We're required by the state to monitor and do certain filtration and so forth at our town wells. We're working with the state to minimize some of that. We don't believe, in fact, the testing we've done indicates that it's actually quite clean water, but until we work with the state and get an agreement, we're still required to invest some money in that process.
Okay. Dennis, I'm gonna hop to another article. I'm not sure if this is a planning thing. It may be the Board of Selectmen, but talking about transfer parcel of land on Boston Road for the new fire station. This is a lot of residents have had concerns about this. Did this start in the planning committee? Does it go through a process and then goes to the Board of Selectmen? How did we get to this point, if you could, on that new fire station from a planning standpoint?
Well, the issue itself originated with the Board of Selectmen, or has gone up through that funnel, if you will. The planning board did have an opportunity to review it probably a year ago, on the first iteration when it went up the first time, and so we did not see it this time around. It did not come before us this time around. So I mean, this is a personal note for me. The only two issues that I think need to be addressed at town meeting with regards to this, and obviously, I mean, we need to improve our public safety facilities, is the issue of access on Boston Road is one thing, which is if it's situated at Boston Road and Boston Road gets jammed, have we sacrificed a broader way of responding to the town by situating it there? And the second, I think there may be some issues with, I think there'll be some issues with the residents nearby, but I mean, there's issues like that with every type of project like that, so we'll have to hear what they have to say as well. But those are the two issues that I personally had, but the planning board did not review it this time around, this issue this time.
Okay.
If I could interject, I mean, how do we get to that parcel, I think, is an important question for town meeting, which is we hired an outside firm to take a look at the past 3 years of our response data. So every call which was a fire or EMS call from any one of our stations, and where did they exist, or what did they respond to around town. Then we held the current Rogers station as a constant, and we held the nav station as a constant, and said, what is the ideal location to put a station to minimize response time to all of our emergency calls in town. And the answer actually was roughly where McDonald's Walgreens is. Now, clearly we're not going to buy that parcel on Route 110, but the Boston Road parcel is the nearest town-owned property that we could use to that site. And the difference in response time, Boston Road versus the ideal site is like 8 seconds, whereas the difference in response time to the average call from the current station versus the proposed new station is over 40 seconds, which is an eternity in medical response time. So the location of the station was arrived at via a response analysis. But yes, if the station were to be approved by town meeting, it goes through the same process that any other building would have to go through in terms of planning board approval and planning and site selection and so forth.
Okay, thank you. David, I'd like to kind of it's not a lot of stuff here, but generally you kind of touched upon it about windows and doors and so forth. Can you give a little, I guess, update on where you think the school system is in its maintaining of the buildings, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well,
you kind of touched on it earlier, but
sure. The updating of the school system is we're still performing at a very, very high level. Recently there was a couple sites that came out, and Westford's school system was voted #1 in the Commonwealth for bang for your buck. As part of that, though, we obviously have to maintain the facilities that we have. And as of right now, and I believe we're going to be updated at town meeting, we're undergoing about a $4.2 million project with respect to the Robinson and the day school. We're upgrading essentially 40-year-old windows and doors. One of the things I think is very important is where we go and how we're going to be utilizing all of our buildings in the future. When you factor in that you've got some declining enrollment rates coming, is that all of the buildings will continuously be used in a school capacity. But the question is we have, well, not the question, but we have to continue to upgrade and maintain the buildings. And that's very, very important for no matter what we do. I've driven around many towns in this area, and unfortunately you see a lot of old municipal buildings that are, they've got those ugly metal, fences around them because they don't want people to go in because they're falling apart. So this project, when it begins and ends, we believe that it's going to be the final piece to shoring up where our whole fleet of buildings is, and we think the taxpayers are going to be very proud of it. But more importantly, we're going to be getting about a 46% reimbursement from a plan that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has. So it's turning out to be really the best and most efficacious way to finance any type of improvements that we have right now. Okay,
well, good. I got a question because it's kind of general for all of you. It's the last one, Article 25, which is about open committees and so forth. And it's a petition. It's a motion by petition to require greater transparency with regard to minutes and participation at all town committees and so forth. And so that kind of covers all of this. I mean, I'd like your opinion of how you see this playing out. I mean, I'm not asking for a board determination, but your personal thing with how you've seen it grow over the years, how people have participated. Is this needed? Is it not needed? Is there things we need to change about how we do our communications on what the committees do?
Certainly, I'll take a first shot. Sure. Certainly, openness, transparency is a goal for town government, our town government in particular. And there are some very positive aspects about this particular petition. There is going to be, I think, some cost to that. I mean, if you really want to have every town committee to have its own homepage on the website, which is not a bad goal, there are about 60 of these committees, which means you're going to have some IT time required to build these sites. Some of the other questions, in terms of posting articles, I don't think you want to post draft minutes personally, because that's the draft, because they could be inaccurate. So I think it makes sense to not do that and only post final ones. But in general, I think it's a well-intentioned article that we need to perhaps refine a little bit. And I guess I also observed that there's a requirement in terms of intent that the minutes should reflect the intent of the speaker on the committee. And I think with volunteer boards many times sharing secretarial duties, we want to kind of minimize we want those to be accurate and complete, but we also want to keep them succinct. So it's a good motion. I think it's just a little bit of tidying up.
From a school's perspective, I'm not sure what the backstory is, but it's tough to vote against something which promotes more transparency, but I believe it would only solve a problem that doesn't exist. I would suggest that the school committee and the school administration does everything that they can to be transparent. I am not aware of any bit of information or data that would not be readily available to anyone that wanted it. I would also bring that over to the Board of Selectmen, and I would concur that I believe the same with them. My dealings, I have to deal with the Board of Selectmen, I have to deal with the town manager and the assistant town manager. I have never had a problem getting information. I've never had a problem with non-transparency. So my frustration also is with meeting minutes, because in this digital era, I know myself, I would never go to the minutes. I would go to the tape, and I would actually watch what happened. So I believe the resolution of this really has to be more on a statewide basis as opposed to a town basis, because we're required to keep these meeting minutes. I would rather we be required to digitally maintain the videos of the meetings. And that would be much better, because I challenge anybody, when they're trying to get certain data or trying to get certain information from a meeting, they're not going to the minutes. They're going to the tape, which exists. So I'm not sure. We seem to want to vote for a problem, which in my opinion, I would respectfully suggest to the petitioner, I don't see that that's a problem that exists.
Dennis?
Yeah, well, I see pluses and minuses to both of these. I think Scott and David referred to a lot of the issues. The one thing that, a couple of things that I would point out is that I would like to let everybody know that we are all governed by the state open meeting law, which is a very rigorous law. It requires, the district attorney can cite us at any time for a violation of that, and part of that requires us to maintain minutes and to post meetings and to make sure that people are available and can have their input. My experience in town with major committees has always been, for example, there's a requirement to mandate open forum. We've always had an open forum on the planning board. I know the Board of Selectmen, I know the school committee has done that as well. And that is always available. When it gets into, some of the requirements go into the weeds, like dictating how minutes are going to be conducted, allowing visitors to come in and be able to participate in the deliberations. That's a difficult thing, because now you may disrupt the continuity of the committee. There's always the opportunity for someone who is to monitor the committee, to watch what's going on, and then when the committee makes its report, to always be at the main committee and to offer its opinions. Most of our stuff on the planning board is governed by public hearings anyway, so people have to be able to come out and speak. But so I think what I'm interested in is what's driving this, and as I say, there are some things in there. If there are committees that aren't running and offering an openness, maybe we have to look at that. But I just wanted to share what my experience has been.
Okay. And if I could just make a very quick shameless plug, when you look at an organization such as WestfordCAT right now, the advancements that they've made on their websites and the access that people have to the meetings here. We are very well served by this organization that's running this particular program right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you. We're kind of winding down here, and the meeting's coming up. We're going to go through it. We'll get, it'll be great. All the stuff we have to do. All the town characters will come out.
Can we do it in a day? That's the big question.
I don't know. But I want you to kind of get past that now. This is just your personal thing. Is on the fields that you're responsible for right now, what do you see as the top challenges in the next 2 to 3 years in your areas that we're going to have to face? Not at this town meeting, but going forward. Just kind of, don't think real deep, but I'm just saying, as you look out there, what are the couple of things that really concern you in your field of planning, school, and Board of Selectmen?
I can go right away. The utilization of technology is enormous. We have brought in some professionals to make a determination as to where we're going with the technology, trying to bring these kids at a younger age into tablets. Now, people say, well, I don't want my kid in front of a tablet. Well, the reality is that's where they're going to be anyways. That's a major issue. And in addition, as a result of declining enrollments, the proper utilization of all of our facilities. And I know the school committee is going to be dedicated quite a bit to looking at that. And coming up real quickly as to whether or not the town is going to be offering full-day kindergarten.
Okay, Dennis?
Well, I think our immediate thing is we're dealing with our asphalt plant issue, and we're chafing under the directives of a land court settlement. We're going to try to work that out and get that completed, and I think that's going to take a little while, but hopefully it'll work out, properly. The second thing is the master plan implementation. We are now engaged in master plan implementation. Some of the issues that were raised in this petition article, like for example, affordable housing, we're going to try to address that and implement that into our policies as part of the master plan implementation. We've got to do a whole redo of our flexible development and OSRD bylaws, and we're looking at some interesting things to try to preserve open space and to diversify housing in certain areas of town. So we've got that's going to be our challenge for the next few years.
Scott?
Certainly, one thing to worry about is, as you look at the budget is a function of your growth plus your current installed tax base. And what we're seeing is a bit of a slowdown in terms of new permits. So as we look ahead of the budget, it's making sure we plan our growth as a town along with the growth in revenues from new development. Apart from that, we've got goals we set every year as a board with the town manager, working with our Ag Commission to increase community gardening. Priority is 12 North Main Street to get that old mill tightened up, made more safe, and hopefully it's eventually turned into a net productive asset for the town. But I would encourage you to look at our website, and on the town website for the Board of Selectmen, you'll see the priorities that we have for the coming year.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the panel for their time and their comments.
Thanks for having us.
Just want to remind you that it's March 28th. At 10 a.m. is the town meeting. It's at the Abbot School, provided the snow will let us get to it by that time. And I just want to thank you for joining us, and just remember that if you're ever confused about anything, always get a second opinion.